Okay, well, before we get out of here, there's one interesting question. It was kind of we tend to do fan questions, and we appreciate. There's been a lot, like I said, a lot of activity in the YouTube chat this week, and we want to hopefully that continues, and we want to make sure that everybody knows that you are invited to join us as we record this show live every week. So please, please, please. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and check us out on Twitter, as I mentioned, because that's where we put the link for you to join us. So please do so. But one of the things we talked about in the chat room last week, and one of the things I've been kicking around over the past couple of weeks, unfortunately, for the optimists that really think the Bengals could make the playoffs, again, still a possibility, but for those who are wanting the Bengals to make the playoffs this year, this segment might be a little bit of a sour taste in your mouth because we're talking about the future in the form of the 2017 NFL Draft. Now, one of the things and one of the big caveats to the success of the Dallas Cowboys this year, aside from really good play from a rookie quarterback and a very good offensive line, is they invested a top 5 pick in a running back that they thought could change their franchise. And Ezekiel Elliott, Ohio State product. A lot of Bengals fans are Ohio State fans, so they probably also root for Ezekiel Elliott, except for when he ran all over the Bengals earlier this year. They probably root for him, and he's been playing well. So I kind of wanted to talk. There's supposedly another game-changing running back in the next year's draft, and that's LSU's Leonard Fournette. And he's big, he's quick, he's strong, he can do a lot of different things. He's had a couple of injuries, but I think he's also playing a little cautious because he's got a very potentially lucrative pro career in front of him. We don't know exactly where the Bengals will end up record-wise or slotted in the draft, but if things start to go south this year and they win, maybe they win one more game or maybe they don't win any, they could be within that top 10, top 15 pick range this year. So one of the things we talked about is what if Leonard Fournette fell to the Bengals in the first round? Do you say, potentially game-changing running back? They've got some good guys, but the run game has still been inconsistent. Let me give a little backdrop here, okay? Because there's pros and cons to both, and I want to get your take, Scott. Jeremy Hill has had a very nice bounce-back year. He's on pace for almost 1,000 yards. He's right around 4 yards a carry. He's probably going to hover around 10 touchdowns again. And he, knock on wood, has not fumbled the ball once this year, okay? And that was a big knock. The yards per carry and the fumbles from last year was a big knock. However, Hill has only cracked the 100-yard mark twice this season, and it was against the Browns both times, which kind of leads you to go, well, unfortunately, that's the Browns. So, do you say, okay, Jeremy Hill's still good but inconsistent? Jeremy Hill has a nice bounce back year. You still got Giovanni Bernard coming back next year, but he's coming off knee surgery. You got Rex Burkhead, who's potentially out the door in free agency next year. So there's a lot of moving parts with the running back position, and I think a lot of people really like the duo of Giovanni Bernard and Jeremy Hill, Scott. But if Leonard Fournette is there, even if you need a pass rusher, even if you need even a right tackle, you need a speedy linebacker. If Leonard Fournette is there, especially if he falls 5 or so spots lower than he's projected, if you're the Bengals, do you pounce on him?
I think when I first saw this question, and this might show where my mindset is, the first thing I thought of was purgatory. And the whole idea that there's this thing out there called purgatory, and there's one definition what purgatory actually is, and so you could go to the Catholic Church or whatever and see what it actually is. There's a lot of people who have this mistaken notion of what it is, and you get a lot of interesting movies and a lot of interesting descriptions from people who just kind of make up here's what I think it is, but don't really know. To me, that kind of reminds me of running backs in the NFL, where there's a lot of people who look at running backs and their statistics and performance and tend to put it a lot more on the running backs than I think it actually is. I think deep down, the true success of a running back in the NFL is the offensive line. If you have a stud offensive line, you're going to have success. We've mentioned Ezekiel Elliott. The year before, Darren McFadden came out of nowhere and I think had like 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns for the Cowboys. If you put him on the Rams, he probably would have had 400 yards and 1 touchdown. So I think a lot of running back success has to do with how good the offensive line is. And I think if you put Fournette on the Bengals offensive line with the struggles that we've seen from Fisher, from Bodine, from Obuehi, I don't think you'd have the same Fournette that you would have if you had him on the line. The Bengals had 7-8 years ago when Rudy Johnson was rushing for 1,400 yards. And we had guys like Bobby Williams and Willie Anderson, Rich Bram. You get those kind of guys. Yeah, Fournette would be a huge addition. I just unfortunately think with the offensive line we have, I don't know what he'd be able to do, because I still believe I think if we had a better line, I think Hill would be a lot better. If you could give him some initial holes to start out, I think he would have he'd be much more like the Jeremy Hill we saw the second half of his rookie year. So I'd be much more inclined to pass, even if he fell to us. And I'm a big believer of best player available drafting, but within reason. Like, I wouldn't take a kicker or a punter in the first round. I wouldn't take a long snapper. I guess I'd have to be convinced that without improving the line, he could be a difference maker. And I don't quite know if he is that guy or isn't that guy. I'd be much more inclined to go after, someone in the trenches, which has kind of been the theme of the episode. So for my money, I tend to pass, but just for those reasons.
And they're good reasons. We've got some interesting comments and I'm going to throw out some stats here in just a second, but got some interesting comments in the YouTube chat. Andrew, who we mentioned earlier, says Fournette equals Gurley if behind a bad O line, and we've seen what happened to Todd Gurley as opposed to his breakout rookie year. You have K Rhodes in the chat also agreeing with Andrew on that sentiment. So let me throw out. Okay, so a lot of people, unfortunately, it's been a little bit of a down year for Fournette this year. He's missed a couple of games, but still has cracked this. He's at 6.5 yards per carry this year. He's played 3 years for LSU, and the big year was his sophomore year, in which he played 12 games. He had 300 attempts, 1,953 yards, 6.5 yards per carry, and 22 rushing touchdowns. But you look at his total, and granted, Jeremy Hill has one less year of college football than Leonard Fournette. Jeremy Hill averaged 6.2 yards per carry in 2 years with LSU, and he averaged 14 rushing touchdowns a year with LSU. Fournette is right there. He's at 13.33 rushing touchdowns average in his career, and he's also at a 6.2 yards per carry. So it's not to say that Leonard Fournette isn't better than Jeremy Hill, because he very well could be, and he could be more talented. But are you looking at a guy that is more of a Eddie Lacy? I mean, he's not as big as Eddie Lacy necessarily, but is he more of that type of guy, or is he an Ezekiel Elliott type of guy? And this team, we've mentioned, needs speed. It needs wide receiver help probably next year. It needs linebacker help. It needs pass rushing help. Again, it kind of comes down to, we talked about this the last couple of weeks, Scott. It comes down to what the Bengals' strategy will be this next year in the draft. Are they going to do what they normally do? That, exactly. Are they going to do what they normally do, though, and kind of sit on their hands and say, let's let the best player fall to us regardless of position and go from there? And that very well could be someone like Fournette. Or do you think this year they maneuver? Do you think they move up, they move back, collect picks, whatever the case may be, and actually grab more positions of need?
I think it depends on who the coach is next year.
Yeah.
We've kind of assumed Lewis is still going to be there. I think if Lewis is there, they do what they always do, which is they kind of stand pat. Let's say they end with like the 13th pick. They'll kind of sit, wait to see who falls at 13, and do that each round. If they make a trade, they'd probably do what they normally do when they traded down for Zeitler or when they traded down for Chris Perry, where they might trade down a couple spots. I don't see them trading up. Now, if you bring a different coach in, let's say he looks at the team and realizes, hey, we have some pretty good pieces here. We have AJ Green, Andy Dalton, Tyler Eifert, Dunlap, Atkins, Burfict. There's only a couple pieces we need. Let's say we're sitting at 13 and a guy they really want is there at 9. We have those 4 extra compensatory picks, and I think
which you can trade this year. Yeah. You can trade them this year.
Trade them. So you're looking at your 7 picks plus your 4. So you're looking at 11 picks, and what we've seen, they don't really need 11 players.
No,
because half of them are just going to end up on the practice squad anyway. Because if Lewis had him, because they're not going to play. He wouldn't play a first-year guy. So, yeah, I could see a different coach packaging them, saying, "Hey, here's someone we really need. Here's a defensive end that fell. Here's a center in the second round that fell. Whatever it is, that hey, we need to move up. We need to get this guy." So I think a lot of it depends on who's there. I'd like the more aggressive strategy only because this is a team that has won for the last 5 years making 5 years in a row making the playoffs up until this year. So they have all those good pieces. Those guys are getting to the point now where they're upper 20s. They're getting into their second contract, so they're not going to be around forever. Once they hit like that 30 plateau, they're probably going to start going downhill. This is kind of that window, and you still have that window. You still have that chance. We still have a lot of good guys on the roster. If you're going to make a run, I think that's what you'd have to do. You'd have to say, yeah, we have a core here. It's really good. We had a crappy year, but that's a great thing because it's given us a chance to get these good people. Let's do the trades we have to do, move up, get these couple pieces we need, and roll in for next year, and we see what happens.
Yeah, and it's do you want to maybe have the rich get richer in a sense of replenishing that position? Jeremy Hill will still be under contract in 2017, but you have that there's future contract issues that need to be worked out. I mean, you look at and the Tennessee Titans this year aren't dominant, but they are a pretty good team. I believe they're 7-7 at this point or something. And in the mix for the AFC South division race, they drafted Derrick Henry this year, and they made a trade for his name is DeMarco Murray. And so DeMarco Murray's having a breakout year. And though Derrick Henry he's only had 82 attempts on the year, he's still averaging almost 4.5 yards per carry. And you have multiple backs that can do a lot of different things for you. So I think it's probably unrealistic. I think the Bengals obviously think Giovanni Bernard will come back with that knee injury and be okay. And I think they're probably a bit encouraged from what they've seen in a bounce back year from Jeremy Hill. So I don't think Leonard Fournette, if he were to fall to them, unless the Bengals end up having a late pick and it's way down like multiple spots, maybe they would do that just to get the best player available. But I think just with the need of speed at wide receiver, speed at linebacker, get some guys that can rotate in and get to the passer, I just think that they would I would think they would pass on that just from a logical and reasonable type of standpoint. But so over the last couple of years, we didn't think they might take William Jackson III. We didn't, there are guys that they kind of surprised us with a little bit, just because they were the best player on their board, and even though they didn't need that position, they grabbed them. So we'll see. But interesting topic nonetheless. We are going to get out of here though, and we're going to end on that one. Appreciate all of you who tuned in live and stuck with us tonight. We missed Connor Howe. Unfortunately, he couldn't be with us, and I appreciate those of you who did tune in live, even though there was a little bit of a schedule change on our end. Scott, I appreciate you not tuning in, obviously, but hosting with me with the schedule change, and appreciate the insight, even though you think that the Bengals will not be victorious this Sunday.
Although I think you had picked that a couple times in the past, so
I know. I'm just trying to villainize. I'm trying to villainize you and take the onus off of me. You know what I mean? So we'll see. You very well could be right though. I mean, the Bengals. We all know. Oh, I know. I think everybody hopes you're not right. But even if that even if it means they are or not going to make the playoffs, I mean, it's just that's a game you just want to win always. And it's Steelers week. For those of you going to the game, let's try and not throw beer bottles onto the field at players if it comes to that. Let's try it.
Flexed out of primetime, didn't it?
It sure did. Yeah, it was supposed to be Sunday night, so that's another thing that plays into the Bengals' corner. It is not on primetime. It is right there at 1 p.m. Eastern. So be safe if you're going to the game. Try not to engage with some of the Steeler trolls that might be there because there's probably going to be a lot of them. They travel everywhere. And cheer for your team. Root for your team. Root for the Bengals. And let's hope that the Bengals come out victorious. For the Orange and Black Insider, I am Anthony Cosenza. Scott Schulte is my co-host. Again, check us out on Twitter, YouTube. Get in touch with us via email. You can check us out on SoundCloud, and you can also get us on iTunes if I didn't mention that already. And you can also check us out on Cincy Jungle. So please do all of that. We appreciate the support. We appreciate the people who tuned in live. You guys in the chat room were awesome. Let's hope we get some more even in the future as this program grows, which it has been. And Scott, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Who day, buddy?
Good day.